Um, Now I don't know how people are going to take to this storyline, but now President Biden has been getting a lot of grief lately. He's basically got low approval ratings, a stalled agenda on Capitol Hill, an inflation-wrecked economy, and dismal prospects for his party in the upcoming midterm elections. But the important issue, and to give credit where it's due, and the fact is that on the issue with the greatest and gravest potential consequences for the United States and the world, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Biden and his team have come about as close to hitting the sweet spot as one could reasonably hope for. This doesn't mean that they've gotten everything exactly right on the topic, but they certainly haven't achieved the goals of people of what we call a plan A. Avoiding the invasion in the first place, defeating Russian forces and expelling them from Ukraine, but accomplishing regime change in Russia by deposing the Russian president Vladimir Putin. Now none of this, or really anything close to it, has happened, but Plan A's are almost never in the cards. Now, what we have is a Plan B world, and judged by that standard, the Biden administration has done very well indeed. Now, what is this Plan B that we're looking at? Basically, the Plan B was that we armed Ukraine, um, so that and basically sharing intelligence with Ukraine so it can effectively defend itself against and inflict significant pain on the invaders. Imposing punishing sanctions on the Russian economy, keeping NATO unified and encouraging its members to contribute more to defense. Now, and all the while, avoiding an escalatory spiral that could draw NATO directly into a war with Russia, a prospect that risks a nuclear conflagration. Now, good governance and wise statesmanship don't always involve finding a prudent mean between the extremes, but this is a case where that really is what Biden has achieved here. On either side, analysts and office holders criticize him. One camp for doing too much, the other for doing very little. Each has some has sorry, I said the wrong word wrong. Each has some cogent arguments on its side. Biden's position is strong, up to a point, and it's important to recognize why. The first group of the Democratic and the Repug critics, now let's call them restrainers, they worry about risks of escalation and they question whether Ukraine and its fate matter all that much to America's vital security interest. We'll concede that if the geopolitical order were being rethought now, and from scratch, there might be a reason to wonder about the wisdom of the U.S. placing great weight on what happens in an economically peripheral country nearly 5,000 miles away in the far parts of the Eastern Europe, right on Russia's border. Now, of course, we aren't in a position to rejigger the geopolitical order from scratch, but in the world in which we find ourselves, we are deeply invested in Europe's security architecture, and we are bound by treaty to defend the members of NATO against any attack. Now, given that baseline, the military invasion of Ukraine, the first of its kind and scope since the end of World War II, the conflict out of which of our commitments to the continent originally rose, it matters a great deal. If the United States and its allies had responded to Russia's invasion with relative indifference, denying Ukraine the means to defend itself and leading to a quick and easy victory for Putin, the Russian dictator might reasonably conclude that the West would respond with similar passivity to an incursion into a NATO state, most likely in the Baltics, to reestablish a land bridge between Russia and the discontiguous outpost of the Kaliningrad Oblast, which is home of the Baltic Fleet of the Russian Navy. Um, that would either prove a catastrophic miscalculation on Putin's part, sparking a direct military conflagration between NATO and Russia, or to demonstrate that NATO is a paper tiger based on a bluff, which would likely inspire even greater acts of Russian aggression against the countries of Eastern and Central Europe. Um, a strong but limited response to Putin's invasion of Ukraine to demonstrate NATO resolve includes a possible expansion of the alliance to Finland and Sweden, and it's a far better course of action, and exactly what the Biden administration has pursued. Now, the other camp of critics, let's call them the escalators, thinks Biden and NATO have done far too little to defend Ukraine and punish Putin. Putin's committing war crimes. He's using threats of nuclear annihilation to bully the West and subjugate a nation. but he's getting away, and also Putin is getting away with genocide, and we can't let him. We fucking have to do something. Of course, we're already doing quite a lot up to a point, but because it isn't leading to the kind of decisive outcome the critics believe morality and international law demand, they must say we must do more. Even if it risks direct NATO participation in the war, even if it means sending American troops to join the battle, even if it greatly increases the risk of a nuclear exchange. The situation is indeed morally grave, and moral considerations need to be a factor in how we respond to these type of events on the ground. In deciding between courses of action in international affairs, it's necessary to do more than just weigh any present policy against a change that we imagine would halt any bad events. That's because the other side also gets to have a say, which means that intervening more forcefully and widening the war could well increase the sum total of human suffering. Now, many Ukrainians have already died, and many more will continue to die as members of the Ukrainian military and civilians fight back against the Russian army. Now, how would that change if NATO became more directly involved? And sending troops to join the fight and maybe even bombing Russian cities, as one prominent public figure recently advocated in a since deleted tweet, the numbers would almost certainly increase, and perhaps by quite a lot, as the theater of battle widened and more deadly weapons were introduced. Now, and that's without contemplating worst case scenarios like Ukraine ended up as a nuclear wasteland. That can hardly be what these critics have in mind when they demand more dramatic forms of intervention, but it could well end up being the result. Now, if the primary goal of U.S. policy is saving Ukrainian lives, we should be urging any future negotiations or surrender to stop the fighting. But that doesn't seem to be what the Ukrainian people want, and it wouldn't necessarily advance any American interest around the globe. Now, given the balance of considerations, the best course of action is doing what we can to aid Ukraine in its fight, while trying to avoid an escalation that can make the situation far worse than what it already is. It's possible to fight with this or that decision of the Biden administration, or statements of the commander-in-chief himself, but overall, President Biden and his team have done an impressive job of ending up with the right mix of force and restraint. The situation could change in all kinds of ways over the coming days, weeks, and months, but for now, Biden deserves high marks for how he's handled the most momentous geopolitical crisis in the decades. Now, if you liked the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of my YouTube channel. And for just as little as a few bucks a month, you can donate, and that can help the channel go a long way. And thanks for listening.